Hey everyone, my name is Jesse Butler. I am a developer advocate in the AWS Container Services team, and I'm happy today to be here to talk about customizing managed nodes in Amazon EKS. So we announced features today that allow you to use launch templates and custom AMIs with managed node groups in EKS, which gives you a lot of options around customization and configuration of managed nodes in EKS. So we have some demos prepared. I might have gotten carried away, so I'm going to get right into it so I don't run out of time. So just to set a little agenda, we're going to start with a brief overview of managed node groups in EKS, and then we'll get right into the new support for launch templates, which allows you to create and update managed node groups with launch templates. And then we'll also spend some time and talk about using custom AMIs with managed nodes. So let's just set a little context first and talk briefly about managed node groups. So EKS provides a fully managed 100% upstream Kubernetes control plane, and that shifts the operational toil of creating clusters and keeping them running from you to AWS. But EKS can also help around the lifecycle management of your nodes and remove some of that undifferentiated heavy lifting. So you can provision instances in EC2 and bring those to your cluster in what we call self-managed nodes. EKS also supports Fargate, where you can provision serverless containers for clusters. Managed node groups sort of is in the middle there. So you're still working with EC2 instances in your account that you have access to, but the EKS service will actually provision those for you, and there's a lot of automation around lifecycle management and updates. So managed node groups are really designed for a best user experience out of the box. And so they use a specific Amazon Linux 2 based AMI, which is optimized for use with EKS. And the nodes are provisioned with opinionated configuration. So until now, managed node groups haven't really aligned well with customer needs around node configuration or the installation and use of additional software, or if you have enhanced security or compliance requirements and need to bring your own AMI, managed nodes haven't really been an option for you. So that's why today we're introducing support of managed node customization. And it's really in two parts. So first, the managed node group API will support launch templates now. So you can provide declarative instance for node configurations and pass that into create and update operations. And also we support custom AMIs for your managed nodes now. So when you need a deeper level of customization or just for whatever reason you need to bring your own AMI. So let's talk briefly about some of the details, and we'll do a little demo, a couple of demos around launch template support. So launch templates provide an opportunity to specify declarative configuration for EC2 instances. So with managed node groups, that's kind of a cool feature in and of itself, where you can actually now specify the configuration for your managed nodes. And the configuration elements include the instance type or EC2 instance tags, your storage configuration, security groups. There's a lot of things in there. The documentation will detail some of the few elements that aren't supported with managed node groups. But for the most part, you're able to define a lot of really meaningful configuration for your managed nodes. And you can also use launch templates for light customization of your nodes. So you can bring in user data, which we'll talk about in a little bit, which are shell scripts or cloud init directives to put OS configuration in place or enable and disable services in the OS. You can install additional software. So we'll get into some of those examples in a bit. So the workflow is pretty straightforward. So you create a launch template, just as you would with any EC2 instance, and then you specify that template in the managed node group create or update through the API, the CLI, or the console. And the awesome people that maintain EKS Cuddle have also made sure that launch templates are supported there as well. So as I mentioned, you can use a launch template to create a managed node group, and the update API also takes a launch template. So what's really nice there is that you can specify a launch template, create your group, and then when you have a change in your configuration, you can version the launch template, and you can also update your managed node group. And the managed node group service within inside of EKS will actually gracefully drain work from your nodes and recycle until the whole node group lands at the new configuration. So let's take a look really quick just at how this works functionally. We're going to start with a very simple use case. Fiddle with getting my terminal over here. So we have just a basic configuration for a launch template here, which we're just specifying the instance type. So with a launch template, anything you don't specify, you'll get default parameters for. So we can actually create this. Or actually, I already did create it. So we can just take a look at it. And you can see at any point, this is just a little shell function that I have to go and grab details of launch templates. So you can see the launch template data is there. It's very straightforward. And so we're going to just start with the CLI just to show sort of what this looks like. So you pass in the launch template and its version, and it will end up in the configuration. So you can see this is the node group configuration of what we just created on this cluster. You see the status is creating, and right here you can see that there's the launch template and its version and the ID. And so if we go and look at that node group, we can see that it's creating right now. And through the magic of television, I've already got some nodes created and some clusters created. So you can see all of these are using that same specification. So they're all t3.small instances. So it's pretty much that simple. So we'll get into some more interesting examples in a bit. Let's get back over to the slides for now. Okay, so there are some things to note when using launch templates with managed node groups. So some elements are configured in the managed node group API, while others have to be in the launch template. So you're going to put things like instance type, your storage configuration, your remote access configuration all into the launch template. And the node group API is going to expect configuration for your instance role, the network subnets that the group is going to be deployed on. And so the API will fail if the configuration is in the wrong place or if it's duplicated. So you'll know right off the bat if you've specified things the wrong way. And so now getting to updating, which I think is a really great feature of this design. So managed node groups can be updated with a new version of a launch template. So we can take that template we were just working with, add some configuration changes, update the managed node group, and EKS will cycle the nodes gracefully. And if you have services deployed there, your nodes will drain gracefully, and your application will remain available, which is really great. So one thing to note, the existing node groups can't be migrated to launch templates. So if you have an existing node group that doesn't use a launch template, you're going to have to create a new one. So let's jump back over to the terminal quick and just take a look at updating a node group. Okay. So let me clear up the screen. So we can actually use the CLI, the EC2 create launch template version command to create a new version of a launch template from an existing one. So we'll actually pass in the launch template that we just created, and the source version is 1. We're going to add some launch template data here. So effectively, this will be added to the existing configuration. And we're not going to have to specify instance type because it's already there. So I'm just going to add in an SSH key and some security groups so that we can actually provide Bastion access to this cluster. And so you see there's the new version, and we can see now the complete configuration in place. And now we can call an update on that managed node group. And EKS will go through the group and actually gracefully cycle all those nodes, like I had said. So let's pop over and take a look at that in the console. I don't know if Yep, actually, we already see some new nodes here. So you're going to see nodes kind of cycle up and down as ECAS works to get to the new configuration. And we can actually just check the status also through the API. And we can see that it's probably in updating. Yes, exactly. So it's going to be in this state for a little while. Again, through the magic of television, I actually pre-baked some node groups here. So I have a bastion over here that I can log into, and we can see just jumping on. So as I said before, we have support for launch templates in eksctl now, which is fantastic. So what's pretty cool about this is if you don't specify a launch template with eksctl, it'll build one for you automatically. So you can see here in the example, you can specify a launch template by ID and version, but also if you don't specify one will be created. So let's go ahead and just build a cluster really quick so you can take a look at how that works. And we'll specify just a basic launch template for the node group in the create. Okay, so we have, again, pretty basic configuration here. And you can see the launch template specification at the bottom. So we can go ahead and create, we could use the same launch template, but I just want to show again how easy this is to create a launch template. And we can grab the ID, go into our launch template specification here. And it's pretty much that simple. So eksctl will create CloudFormation stacks and actually run the state for that cluster creation, including the node group, and the node group will be based upon that launch template that we specified. Okay, so let's bounce back over to the slides again. So one of the really powerful features here is that launch templates allow you to specify user data. As I said before, it can be a shell script or cloud init directives. And you can do a lot of things with this user data. You can add users in groups, or you can install and configure software. You can modify OS configuration, enabling, disabling services. So you can really do a lot of things here within reason, right? So just don't forget that these nodes are meant to act as EKS nodes in a Kubernetes cluster. So don't rm-rf etc EKS, for example. So effectively, if the nodes come up in the cluster, your configurations are okay. So let's look at a really quick example of a good use case. We're going to install the Amazon SSM agent and enable it for our managed nodes. So let's bounce over to our terminal again. eksctl is still humming along. So we're going to go back to our Hermione cluster. So if we look at this script, I just wrote a very basic shell script to install Amazon SSM agent and then enable and start the daemon. And this is going to run on the first boot. So this is basically like a one-shot config injection. And so what we do is we can encode that base64 and add it to a JSON blob, which is our launch template. And the user data just gets injected there. And so you can see this is setting a couple of other things like an SSH key and some security groups, and then that script is in place for user data. So we can go ahead and create a launch template with that JSON. And what's nice is that the JSON can be kept in source control, right? So between the versioning system and launch templates and keeping your JSON specifications in source control, you have a lot of really good scaffolding for infrastructure as code practices. So here's our launch template, and we can go ahead and pass that to a create node group on this cluster. And ECAS will provision those nodes and bring them up, and EC2 will ensure that that user data, which is the shell script that we specified, is run at first boot. And so we can actually see here that we already have some nodes provisioned, as I said, so just trying to save on time. And we can get back to our bastion and pop over. And now we can actually just ensure, again, this is a managed node that we just specified in a launch template. And we can see that SSM agent is installed and it's running. And so any configuration you needed to inject there as well could go in. So now let's get into talking about using custom AMIs with managed node groups. So as I said before, by default, managed nodes are provisioned with an Amazon Linux 2-based optimized for EKS AMI, and that is still the default, but you now are able to specify your own AMI, and you might do this for any number of reasons. So you may have enhanced security requirements or hardening or some type of compliance, or you might have an org that's just standardized on a different distro. So for whatever reason, you've likely been using managed nodes, self-managed nodes, and now you can check out the benefits of managed node groups by bringing your custom AMIs. So really any AMI can serve as an EKS node in the managed node group within, there are some caveats like before, right? You have to make sure that the node is actually capable, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. One thing to note that managed node groups, which aren't already specifying a custom AMI, can't be migrated to using one. So you have to create a new node group if you want to move to a custom AMI. So you specify custom AMIs with managed node groups in the same way that you specify configuration elements in the launch template. So you set the image ID and the user data, which is required, and then you use the launch template to create or update the managed node group. So when using a custom AMI, there's a couple of configuration elements here that don't make sense. So AMI type, release version, and version. If you're specifying a custom AMI, the node group create will actually fail if you specify those. So those are used to determine which EKS AMI to use. So they don't really make sense. So again, you'll be told right off the bat that something's wrong in the config. So there's a couple of good resources here when you're considering using custom AMI. So first is the EKS AMI build specification, which is on GitHub. And there's configuration scripts and documentation there around building your own Amazon EKS AMI based on Amazon Linux 2. There's also a great repo in AWS samples for building custom AMIs for EKS using different distros. So it uses Make and Ansible and Packer to do some magic, which is what I use to actually create the ones that I'm using for the demos today. So let's just talk quickly about user data. So with any launch template, you can specify user data. With a custom AMI, the user data is not merged with what EKS uses to bootstrap the nodes in a managed node group. So effectively, when you're using a custom AMI, we give you the keys, which means that you have to do that for us. So you may have in your bootstrap some additional kubelet args you want to pass, for example. So we're not going to stomp on that by inserting the default bootstrap. So what that means is that you have to specify the bootstrap and user data at a minimum if you're going to specify a custom AMI. And if your nodes are in a private network, you're also going to have to specify the EKS, the cluster endpoint and the cert in that bootstrap data. So this is probably best shown with a demo, so I can show how that works. So let's get over to our terminal again. Clear the decks. Okay, so what we want to look at here first is that bootstrap that I was talking about. So this looks like a big old mess, but really what this is just the invocation of the EKS bootstrap on the managed node. And the big blob in the middle, of course, is the cluster cert, and then we set the endpoint as well. So for your cluster, you're going to be able to get that through the API by any number of means. And again, if your nodes are running on a public network, you don't have to worry about it. So we'll look at that in a bit too. But if your nodes are on a private network, you can ask for the endpoint and the certificate authority and get that data, and then put it into your bootstrap script. And you can also specify other things in this script. This is just at a minimum what you need to do in order to have EKS actually start this as a managed node. So again, let me clear this. So again, we'd base64 encode that and put it into a launch template. So again, same thing, only now we're setting image ID, and the user data has the required bootstrap, and then we're setting a security group for the cluster security group. So we can go ahead and create this. I'm sure nobody's screenshotting that big wall of text, so I'll just clear it. So yeah, we can create this launch template, and as you can see from the launch template name, actually the version description rather, we're actually using a custom AMI that is based on RHEL 7 and is also STIG hardened, which is really cool. And that was really easy to do with that project that I referenced before. And so now that we've built that, we can ask EKS to create a managed node group with it. And this is going to behave just like any other managed node group. It's just that the managed node in this case is going to be provisioned using my custom AMI. And if we take a look at the node group configuration, we can actually see that the launch template is specified. So you can, at any point in time, see what launch template and what version you've used to provision a node group. And if we take a look, it should be in creating. That'll be the status, right? And so once again, I've pre-baked something here. And actually, we can just look at it right here. Make sure I'm on the right cluster. Yep. And just take a look at the, I can't type and talk at the same time, sorry. We just look at the operating systems in our nodes, and we can see there's 1 and 2. So I've created quite a few here doing these demos. So, but you see, these two are actually the two that were provisioned with that RHEL 7 based STIG hardened AMI. So, and you can see that's just an example. I mean, really, if you follow the rules around what needs to go into the bootstrap, you can literally use any AMI that will successfully run as a Kubernetes node in EKS. All right, so the last thing I wanted to cover here is using custom AMIs with eksctl. And so in one of the use cases is very similar to what we just saw. So you can have a launch template that specifies your custom AMI and your user data and specify it in the eksctl config. What's really cool is you can also leave the launch template out. And like I said before, eksctl will create a launch template for you automatically. But this allows you to just use eksctl configuration if that's your typical workflow. And you can just specify the AMI and the user data right in the eksctl config, which is, I think, is pretty slick. So let's just jump over and take a look at what that looks like. Getting back over to our, oh, that one's still running. So we'll just pop into the right directory here. So we take a look here, we actually have specified another RHEL 7 based AMI that I built, and we're specifying in the override bootstrap command all of the data that would go into our script, which we would base64 encode and then insert into our launch template. Eksctl does that for us, which is pretty great. So also note, you don't actually have to pass here, just to loop back on something I said earlier, this is going to run on public subnet, so you don't actually have to pass the cluster configuration, so the endpoint and the cert, which means that you can actually do this when you're creating the cluster. You can specify a managed node group that uses a custom AMI this way. And so obviously, we're not going to sit and wait for that to finish, but you see that's how it works. So we'll just pop over here and jump into one of our pre-baked node groups, and you can see here it's running RHEL 7. This is an EKS cuddle managed cluster that we defined, where we set the custom AMI and the user data right in the EKS cuddle config. So I think that's really slick. So we've talked today about various ways to customize your managed node groups in EKS. So managed node groups to me represents the evolution of EKS as a service, which not only helps remove that undifferentiated heavy lifting in the Kubernetes control plane, but also in the data plane where your nodes live, and offers automation around provisioning and lifecycle management of your nodes. And until recently, if you've had customization requirements or you've needed to bring your own AMI to your clusters, you've not been able to leverage that. So this should be a really great feature for you to check out, using launch templates and custom AMIs in managed node groups. So with that, I'll say thanks. This is my contact information here. So hopefully, wherever it is, there's been comments and questions during the session. And if your questions weren't answered, or if you have them later, please reach out and ping any one of us. That's my contact info there with my Twitter handle. Also, this work really was motivated, as almost all of our work is, by customer input. And you can look at our containers roadmap, which is on GitHub, and you can see what we're planning, what work we're planning in the near term and the long term that we're considering. And if you see something there that you're interested in, please comment, add upvotes. And if you don't see what you're interested in, please open an issue and we'll take a look at it. Again, thanks very much.